Hi, everybody. This is Margie Meacham, founder of Learningtogo.info and author of Brain Matters: How to Help Anyone Learn Anything Using Neuroscience. With me today is e-learning consultant and thought leader, Joe Ganci, and we'll be speaking with Joe in a minute. I just wanted to remind all of you that our early bird special for the Brain Matters online conference, November 10 and 11, is expiring soon. Remember, on those 2 days, we're going to gather neuroscientists, education leaders, teachers, and psychiatrists, and we're going to explore the concept of genius and bringing it out in ourselves through the lens of neuroscience. So if you can sign up before July 10, you'll take advantage of our half price rate. Price goes up on July 10, which is still a deal, but since you already know you want to attend, why not save $100? Check out learningtogo.info for more. Now, let's get to our podcast. Joe is also known as eLearning Joe, and he's a learning consultant with a long and illustrious track record. He's the recipient of the prestigious 2013 Guild Master Award, and he's designed approaches, and his use of development tools have helped many to improve their e-learning design and development, including me. Joe's personal hands-on style keeps him constantly in demand with many clients all over the world, so I really appreciate that he took the time to meet us today. He has a degree in computer science, he's a published author, and he's on a mission to improve the quality of e-learning with practical approaches that work. Those of you who know me might think this mission sounds a little familiar, since I'm on a mission to find practical applications of neuroscience to learning and performance that work. One of Joe's specialties is his expertise in authoring systems, and that's what I'd like to talk to him today. So, Joe, thanks so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
And first, for someone who might be new to the concepts of e-learning and authoring tools, can you give us your definition of each?
Well, sure. And actually, they're synonymous in most ways. Authoring tools, e-learning development tools, these are tools that we tend to use to create learning programs. Now, you can create a learning application online, for instance, on a website, in almost anything, including PowerPoint. But these are tools that are specially created to help address the needs of e-learning professionals, or in essence, learning professionals. If you need to help a lot of people, especially a lot of people, to learn something new, whether it's a new process, procedure, software application, whatever it might be, these are the tools that you can use to help you get there faster. So they're specially set up to help you meet the objectives that you need to have learners address and meet. And some of the more popular ones include Adobe Captivate, Articulate Storyline, Trivantis Lectura, and so on. These are not tools that are real familiar to those who are not in the learning field, but those who are in the learning field tend to know these tools because they're the ones that are used day to day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, you've worked with almost every authoring tool out there. Do you have a personal favorite?
It's a good question that I have to say, not exactly. I can't exactly say I have a personal favorite. There's one I use the most, and that's probably Adobe Captivate, only because it is the tool that most of my clients tend to be using. It is the most popular authoring tool right there in the marketplace now. Articulate Storyline is also a very popular tool, and I've used that quite a bit. Lectura from Trivantis is also popular, and I've used that for several projects as well. Each of these tools has strengths that the others lack. Each of these tools also have weaknesses that others lack. So it's really a question of, when a client comes to me and says, "Hey, Joe, we'd like you to create for us a learning program," I will ask a lot of questions at the beginning to really ascertain exactly what needs to be accomplished for the learner base, for the topics that have to be covered, for the kinds of interactivity that have to be included, the kind of media that has to be included, etc. And then, as a result of all that, I can say, well, the best tool for this job that will help me get there fastest and still provide the best learning experience for the learner is going to be this one. Now, again, because sometimes clients come to me and say, "Hey, we have our own internal team that uses this tool or that tool," they'll want me to use that same tool that they're using so that they can continue to maintain the learning application after the fact, and that's perfectly understandable. In many cases, that happens to be Adobe Captivate, and so I tend to use that. I do like Adobe Captivate very, very much. And if push came to shove and I was told you could only ever use one tool forever and ever, I would probably use Adobe Captivate just because it's probably contains more of the powerful features that I want in it. It, on the other hand, it lacks in many areas, and so there are times when I feel like just chucking them all and going back to straight programming, because that's where I have all the freedom available to me. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, that takes more time to get the end result and so on. So Captivate is a really good compromise for me between having all the power I would like and at the same time being able to get there faster. But again, I want to reiterate that Articulate Storyline, Cervantes Lectora, all of these other tools I really enjoy using as well, because at times they are the perfect fit for what I'm trying to accomplish. You mentioned that I'm well versed in tools, and that's true, probably more so than most, but there are actually several hundred tools available for purchase, and obviously most of them are not don't have a big market share. But I always like researching and investigating new tools, because I'm always looking for what's available out there that can help me help my learners faster. And to that end, I do a review for Learning Solutions magazine, which we can share after the fact. The link to that's free, and you can see my monthly reviews for the last 4 or 5 years on different tools available. So
Oh,
that's
great.
just of it.
That's great, Joe. We will definitely share that link so everybody take a look at our closing slides and also the write-up in the newsletter, so you can get that link from Joe. You mentioned the investment that our clients have to make in authoring tools, and I find the very same thing that you do, that very often they've already made the investment, so my job is to use whatever tool they're already invested in. But sometimes people will ask me, isn't there anything out there that's open source, free, or extremely low cost that I could use instead of these fairly expensive authoring tools that are the most popular? In your studies, have you run across any good ones for the very budget conscious user?
Oh, well, yes. Not only have I run across them, I've actually delivered presentations and written reports on free and low-cost authoring tools, and actually have a handout that I can make available to you, Margie, if you'd like to share it with others. We'll talk about that after the fact, and I'll send that to you. At any
Okay.
rate, there it's interesting to find out that even some of the tools that we already mentioned, such as Adobe Captivate is not free, although almost all of these tools have a 30-day trial. Some of them have a 15-day trial, some of them have a 20-day trial, but most have a 30-day free trial that is not encumbered in any way, meaning that whatever you create, you can really take advantage of all the features in that tool. Uh, and so that's a great way for free to find out whether a tool is going to work for you. And then after the fact, yes, you could license it at a fee. Adobe Captivate, for instance, is $30 a month, which is what, 3 or 4 lattes nowadays at
Mhm.
Starbucks. But it's relatively low cost for a very powerful tool. Other tools, of course, don't have that option. Another one that I can think of is Adobe Presenter, which is a PowerPoint add-in tool that has some pretty cool features, but is more limited, than Captivate. And that one's $15 a month. So again, pretty cheap, considering the power. Here's the gist. There's a lot of tools that are absolutely free, but with those tools, what you're going to have is no technical support, no real support out there in terms of people using it who are willing to share their ideas with you and so on. If a tool costs a little bit of money, well, you get all that too. But if a tool is free, you're pretty much on your own. So if you're comfortable with that, absolutely, there are some nice tools that are available out there that are free. Interestingly, for instance, there's a set of tools that are PowerPoint add-in tools, and these are the ones that basically are that you see as extra tabs in PowerPoint when you open them, when you open PowerPoint. And so among those is Adobe Presenter 10, Articulate Studio 13, and so on. Some of them are free. AuthorPoint Lite is a free one. iSpring Free Suite is free as well. Microsoft Mix, which is a Microsoft product, add-in product for its PowerPoint, as long as you have an Office license, which of course you do if you own PowerPoint, then Microsoft Mix is free, and it can do screen recordings, and you can add audio and video, and you can even, in essence, publish to SCORM nowadays. But you may find it's limited in other ways. And so again, it's one of those things that you have to understand that if it's free, it may not necessarily meet all your needs. But yeah, I'm happy to share my document with you so you can see all the different free tools that are out there, and then some. I'm sure there are others I've missed along the way, and I'm trying to continually update and compile such a list as well. So yeah, they're available, and for those who are budget conscious, who are willing to put in that extra time, to have more time than money in essence, then it's certainly they are certainly viable options.
Okay, great. I know our listeners will be looking forward to that. Now, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because, of course, the tool is only as good as the designer. And I know that's another big part of your consulting service is the creative approaches to make really effective learning. So let's say you're starting a new project today. Walk me through your process to the finished product.
Absolutely. Before I do that, let me tell you a little bit um, about what has happened with tools over the last 10 or 15 years, because that's going to
Mhm.
play into what I'm about to tell you. The truth is that when we're talking about instructional design, it used to be done differently. And sometimes it still is done this way. We used to have teams of people within an organization, maybe one, two, or three people, maybe more on a team, that were strictly instructional designers. They were the ones who are very good at knowing how people learn, and they have degrees in instructional technology or design, masters typically, or better, and they are putting together the materials on paper or in PowerPoint or some other means, to then hand over to a team of developers who tend to be more left-brained, who tend to be more technical, not necessarily highly creative, although they can be. But they're the ones who know how they're the ones who know how to manipulate these different tools to create the very best learning based on what the instructional designer has given them. So they're not really in a position to change any of the design. They're there to implement the design, and they're happy to do so. That's how it used to be. Then tool vendors started to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we can make our tools easy enough for instructional designers to use them directly, and in essence, then cut out the developers out of there, making a person both an instructional designer and a developer. Well, that wasn't too bad an idea, but because the two camps tend to use different parts of the brain, it's not everybody who can be both a good instructional designer and also be a developer to the degree that they really should be to create the best design possible. And so let me give you an example. Let's say that we're doing a lesson on a new heart surgery procedure. And in so doing, the designer is the instructional designer says, the very best thing we can do here is to help the learner to understand where to put the clamp when performing our surgery, where to put it on the artery. And so the best thing we can do there is have them drag the clamp over to the correct position on the artery to clamp it down so that, the surgery can proceed. Well, let's say that the instructional designer says that's the very best possible way we can help the learner understand this. But you know what? I don't know how to do that in this tool. Or maybe the tool itself doesn't really do that. So let's change that out. Let's make it a multiple choice question, because I know how to do that. Well, at that point, yeah, the instructional designer knows how to make a multiple choice question, but boy, oh boy, they have robbed the learner from the experience of knowing how to do the job and simply answering a multiple choice question. The old joke is that when you go in for an interview, for instance, nobody sits there and asks you, which of the following is true, A, B, C, or D? People don't talk in multiple choice questions in real life. That as much as possible, you want your learning experiences to be based on real life experiences, so that in real life, you'll then know how to proceed more easily without making mistakes and killing the patient. So in our case, what we're talking about is that at that point, instructional designers started to feel as if they were being, in essence, cornered. They could no longer design to the degree they wanted unless they were also a very good developer, which again, kind of rare to have someone who's strong in both, and at the same time have the time to both design and develop. So what they would tend to do is to jump into the tool and start, in essence, developing without really thinking through the design entirely. And that was not necessarily the best thing. Now, that alone was not the greatest idea. But what was much worse than that, is what's come later and more recently in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit longer, are those tools that say, hey, guess what? You don't need an instructional designer at all. Any subject matter expert can now create great learning by using our tool. And so the instructional designers who prior were used to talking to a subject matter expert on heart surgery, because the instructional designer was not a heart surgeon, she was, or he was a someone who understood learning. And that person would then talk to the heart surgeon, try to glean all the information out. Well, no, you don't need that person. And you don't even need a developer anymore. The heart surgeon herself can take and create the lesson directly, or someone who understands the topic can do that. Well, gosh, golly gee willikers, that is not a good idea at all, because subject matter experts are typically not instructional designers and typically not developers either. So what happened is that, whereas I said earlier, instructional designers were not necessarily developers, but some of them were and could be, well, that's much less of a truth when it comes to subject matter experts. Most every single one of them is not an instructional designer, and certainly not a developer either. So what we have now is a situation where, when starting a new project, when I'm trying to start a new project, I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing. I know what to look for, and I know then what tools I want to eventually use. But some of the questions, of course, and this is not new to anybody who's well versed in this field, some of the questions I have to ask at the beginning include, well, who are the learners? And that means also, where are they located? How are they going to be distributed? What languages do they speak? And do we need to deliver in more than one language? What is their education level? How much time are they able to commit at any given sitting, if they're going to be taking all the learning at once, or whether they're going to be splitting it up piecemeal? These are the kinds of questions that we need to ask about the learner. Then, of course, the technology. What browsers have to be supported? How are we delivering this learning? Is it possible that in some cases people don't have access to the internet still, because they're far flung around the world in places where maybe internet's not truly available yet? And so do we need to deliver this still on CD-ROM or DVD-ROM? That hasn't happened in a while, but I hear stories about that still on occasion. So knowing the technology that has to be supported, does it have to go on mobile devices? Do people have to be able to look at it on their mobile phones and have a rich learning experience there? These are really important questions to ask as well. And then, of course, the whole idea of the context of the learning. Is this learning going to be placed as part of a blended learning solution, or is it going to be isolated? Is it going to be something that people are going to be accessing as part of their day-to-day activities at work, or not? So there's a lot of questions that we ask at the beginning. And then based on that, I'm going to start to put together an analysis document and also a design document that illustrates what's going to be all of the global elements that are needed in the course. What kind of navigation is it going to include? What kinds of features is it going to have? What color schemes, and so on. Following that, we may either take one of two approaches, and sometimes we combine these. We'll either go with a rapid prototyping approach, where we are working with our customer or subject matter expert to prototype very quickly some interactions and other things that we might be trying to include in the course. And that way we can get good buy-in and have everybody agree on the final result of that, and then be able to use that over and over in our course. That kind of an approach, mixed sometimes with storyboarding, where we have some traditional storyboarding approaches, especially at the start of a project, so that everybody can see what's going to be included. And sometimes it's very important that we have all the detail in there. But then for larger projects especially, those initial storyboards may start to move out to more simplified scripts and such, because we now know what we're building, how it's going to be built. There are no real surprises coming later, and we're just going to be using and reusing the same kinds of approaches and templates and so on. So that's how I start a project. and then I always try to finish it very successfully. So if that doesn't answer your question, let me ask you, what other questions might you have regarding that?
Well, first of all, yes, that's a really good description, and I really appreciated the history. And I agree with you that the concept that just anybody can build learning and be effective is a dangerous one. And typically, clients don't get the results they expect when a subject matter expert is asked to um, jump in and suddenly be an instructional designer and a developer, both of which professions take years to really be good at. So I think that was a great answer to the question, Joe. And I have one more for you.
Sure.
What are you working on now that really excites you?
Well, okay. So the main project I'm working on right now for a client that really does excite me is called motivational interviewing, and it's I've been working on it since the start of the year. It's a largish project, and it's going to be used by medical professionals, including even at every level, including pharmacists and dental assistants and anyone else, anyone who has to deal with patients, people who are sometimes resistant to suggestions about how to improve their health, for instance, and knowing how to talk to them in ways that gets the patient to do the right thing, by not putting them on the defensive, by making sure that they know that the healthcare practitioner understands what they're saying, and so on. It's a fascinating area that's been taught in the classroom for 25 years or more now. There are books about it now, and I'm working with a couple of professionals in this area who wrote a book, a successful one, on motivational interviewing. And we're turning this into a true e-learning course that's going to be used for certification. I can't seem to say that word today. Anyway, it's a pretty exciting project for me. I've been able to assist a lot in the design on this, and we found some really neat ways of making the end result easier and cheaper in the end, while being just as effective as some of the original ideas. So that kind of excites me. Well, besides that, though, in the near future, I'll be working on several new books, mostly on using tools. I have I'm going to be working on a new blog as well, which will cover a great variety of topics in e-learning. Everything I tend to do is practical. I'm not that much into theory, though, of course, theory underlies everything I do. But I'm not out to teach theory necessarily as much as I am giving people solutions at work. I've been doing this for 32 years. I still love what I do, but I also see that people's time is limited and that they need to get the kinds of assistance that will help them get to help their learners faster. There's no sense in working 3 years on something if at the end of those 3 years it's too late. Learners already have passed you by. So it's true that we have to get things done faster and better, but the resources for that sort of thing are sometimes lacking, and that's where I'm going to be trying hard to make sure that's the case. So if anyone wants to contact me at joe@elearningjoe.com, or contact me through my website, elearningjoe.com, I'll keep you posted as to future endeavors, and you can take advantage of all that.
Absolutely. And maybe we can have you back to talk about your new book.
Sure.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, Joe. And everybody, you've been listening to Joe Ganci, eLearning Joe, and his website again is eLearningJoe.com. That's Joe, Joe. And as you can see, he has a lot of really cool stuff coming up. So thanks so much, everybody, and watch for the next Brain Matters podcast coming soon.
Thank you, Margie. It's a good question that I have to say.